So thank you very much. Thank you for sticking around. In the interest of the time it is, I'll try to be as brief as possible, and hopefully can remain as substantive as possible. But essentially what I'm talking about is innovation, an approach we take here at AOL, or really at advertising.com, which is proactive versus reactive. So starting with innovation in general, just on a philosophical level. Is there any math majors here? Not a single math major. That's disheartening.
Why are you looking at me?
So in determining the probability of something in a range, so let's say I want to find the probability of a binomially distributed random variable, so a coin flip. And I say, let's find the probability that out of a certain amount of trials I'm going to get this many heads, or this many heads, or this many heads. What if I just say, what's the probability I'm going to get greater than 2 heads? So then we're going to have to calculate the probability of 2, then 3, then 4, all the way to however many trials I have. Wouldn't it be easier just to calculate the probability of getting 1 head and subtracting it from 1, call it the complement? That's the way we define innovation. I don't define innovation by any of the infinite affirmative adjectives we can use to define it. I define it by its complement. It's a developed product or a service that's not status quo. It's outside of a company's comfort zone, or if it's standard thought convention. Now, having said that, I really don't like academic-based black letter definitions of innovation. Why? Because it's an art form. It's not a science, it's an art form. There was a question about innovation science. If that were someone pitching the idea to me, I'd say that's an oxymoron. There's no such thing as innovation science. Innovation is an art form.
Well, Google it and make sure.
Hey.
We can have to make sure.
Sure.
Let me say it was pretty interesting. As a means to define it, when you come up with an idea, you said that if you're doing a job, if there's a 7% more stronger likelihood that your business will succeed as opposed to doing an idea. People have ideas, but they don't do currently existing jobs, maybe tasks or using, So it was interesting. Google it.
The reason I say innovation is an art form is because, like art, it can come from any person within any organization. There's a saying I believe strongly, which is that not everybody can produce great art, but great art can be produced by anyone. It's a cultural characteristic of a business. It's not about what you produce, it's about how you think, it's about how you act, it's about how you interact with each other. It's about how the top brass interacts with engineers, who interacts with business, who interacts with sales. It is a cultural characteristic. The value is always in the eye of the beholder. We can debate ad nauseum about certain things of, well, are they innovative or not. Some people say, of course they're innovative. They're a $1 billion organization. So what? So is Coke. Is Coca-Cola an innovation in the current state today? It's a $1 billion industry. So, in the interest, any other lawyers here? Okay, that's actually a good thing. In the interest or in the spirit of my legal education, I'm going to engage in a little bit of Socratic method of teaching, which will give me nightmares until I die. Quick exercise. Is Facebook an innovative product?
In what respect?
Pardon me?
In what respect?
Give me
Because
one.
there may be certain aspects of it's done a lot more social aspect, which you could argue is sort of an innovative product.
Sure, maybe
You could argue Facebook has done what we've done for a long time, which is to put up a bunch of people's faces and put it as part of a book. So in some respects, it's not very innovative.
Valid argument. Anyone agree or disagree?
I disagree based on your own definition.
Okay.
Because you said it was a developed product outside the comfort zone of the existing organization.
Okay.
There was no existing organization.
Okay. Well, let's say outside of an existing thought process. Doesn't have to be an organization.
I'd say it is because it got 1 billion members.
$2 million members.
So it has organic growth.
What about 100 million? What if it was only 100 million?
I think that's pretty outstanding, yeah.
What about 1 million?
That's still pretty rapid growth.
How about 100?
Seriously. That's a startup.
Startup?
But 100 in 2 minutes is pretty rapid growth.
Okay, so the point is, there's a lot of ways to look at it. You know, someone can say, well, it IPO'd for 8 figures, or for, I'm sorry, way more than that, in the billions. What about? This is my argument. Yes, it is. Why? It's simple. The word may in the phrase "I may never hear from him or her again" is now much more likely to happen. How many people did you see or talk to on the day of your high school graduation that you thought to yourself, 50 years from now, I'm not going to know what the hell they're doing, nor will I care? Better question. How many of you now know what that person is doing and actually give a shit? For one, there were people I honestly thought would never see again. But for Facebook, I would have no idea what they're up to. I'd have no idea what their job is. I'd have no idea what their family status is. If they have kids, if they're married, if they're still alive. To me, it's innovative because that one word and that one phrase now becomes much less likely. Now, unofficially here, we kind of operate under this innovation dichotomy, which is proactive versus reactive innovation. And I really stuck the verses in there just because that's the way you cite cases and in the legal field. They're really not combative ideas. They just exist. Proactive is what it sounds like. Extensive R&D, engineering, marketing, fueled by some forward thinking, to create something new, something never offered before, something that may seem like a real gamble to begin with. Reactive, you take a discrete problem, opportunity, it's presented to you or it's out in the marketplace within your industry, and you try to capture it and develop a solution, and you end up with a company-wide solution or business method. Pretty simple. Proactive innovation. The goal is disruption. It's when we want product to shape demand. It's when we say to ourselves, consumers, they want this, they just don't know it yet. And it happens all the time. How many startups is that what you're saying? You're saying, yeah, no one's doing it, it's my idea, it's going to be awesome, it's going to disrupt the entire industry.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the innovation science thing. One of the things that might be, it feels like it's missing here is discussion of added value.
Does innovation science have a formula? Does it have a
It does,
model, a
but
parameterized model?
That's what she was talking about.
But one of the things that I'm seeing missing is a discussion about added value and how critical that is, because so many startups fail because they go for this goal of disruption without thinking about added value. And some of them hit and they change their lives and we're doing stupid things we don't need to be doing. But a lot of times we don't end up doing those stupid things we don't need to be doing. We didn't need to be doing them. And so it's much more of a gamble when we go for disruption without thinking about added value as a point to strengthen your business model.
Fair enough. So characteristics of proactive innovation. So for a startup, right? The pros are there's less process resistance. So I'm going to talk about this as I move on to the more large company scenario. Typically, as part of your initial growth strategy, it's typically your main offering, your first splash. The first thing you want to do is what you want to be known for. It's the flag you're planting in your business. And there's a high reward potential. So that's always a good thing. Cons, it's expensive, it's high risk, and you have limited resources. The 3 things they teach you, first day of business school. For the large company, pros, obviously, we have more resources. We can hedge our risk. If we have a core offering and we want to branch off into something, if it fails, it's probably not going to take the company down. We're not going to, if we're smart about it, we're not going to leverage everything that we currently offer and our existing solid revenue streams and bet the farm on some crazy idea. You can. It can happen. But we have that, at a large company like ours, we have kind of had that luxury of hedging our risk. And a selective cost structure. We can make it as small or as big as we want, depending on how much faith we have in it. Cons, cumbersome planning and dev process, which kind of is the inverse of the less process resistance. How many enterprise businesses here? How difficult is it to go from a cocktail napkin idea to an actual offering to your clients? It sounds easy. Say, oh, you have all these engineers, you have all these resources, you have all this technology. Big company is a big bureaucracy. It's a lot of egos in one room. It's a lot of people with conflicting interests. Everybody's voice wants to be heard. It can sometimes be a mess. And also there is the impatience for incremental success. How many people here have had the experience where you develop something new? Doesn't take off the way you want it to. You try to spin it as a long play, meaning it's a Warren Buffett type investment. It's not going to smash overnight. It's going to take years. And you have a boss or a boss's boss who says, yeah, I don't think so. If this thing doesn't hit by now, it's not going to hit at all, and it gets scrapped. Frustrating, but it happens. Sometimes it's warranted and sometimes not. So I want to just do a real quick example. The advent of the CPA business model and .com circa 2001. .com bust just happened. Something like 70% of ad.com's startup employees have been laid off. They've lost just an astronomical amount of business. I was about to graduate Loyola with an electrical engineering degree, and I was applying for jobs when I came here. They're talking about this thing called the CPA business model. The idea is to offer risk-free performance-based advertising to its customers. What does that mean? That means we only get paid for when an internet user not only sees an ad, not only clicks on an ad, but actually does something subsequent to that. Makes a purchase on Amazon. Goes to Match.com, signs up for a free trial. Now, at the same time, we're paying all these publishers guaranteed money to show the ads. There's no guarantee of revenue, but there's guaranteed money out. That's a huge risk, huge risk. And at the time, I mean, there was like tenuous demand for this. Nobody thought it could be done. The thought of it was, well, why? Why would you take on the added risk when people are still paying for just to show the ads, or just on a cost per click basis, which is still risky but a little bit less risky? It was a high cost, huge upgrade to tech and operational, huge R&D investment. We had a team of Stanford PhDs in our West Coast Silicon Valley office working on this. I mean, it was not a cheap endeavor. But it was a high reward. It's a 9-figure revenue stream. It's a multi-billion-dollar business industry-wide. We started right here.
Yeah. How long did that take?
CPA was one of those things that, like any idea like that. It was already established when I started here, but it was the vast minority of our business. It probably took a year of solid work to get it off the ground, to be able to service the first advertiser. It took a year to kind of ramp it into something that could have some potential to grow. And it will take until myself and Elliot are long, old, and retired before we ever get a fully grasp on the scale. Because scaling it is going to be a challenge as long as this company's in business. Yes, sir.
I presume that ad.com was in the CPM business prior to that?
CPM.
CPM.
And CBC. CBC was big at the time.
So how long were they in that business? How was business trending? Were they profitable? In other words, was this sort of a desperation move to do this?
It was. It was. I mean, the majority of the business before 2001, before the .com bust, for .com businesses, were basically startup websites that were search engines, things like that. Well, think about how many search engines there were in 2000. Paying for clicks, or even just brand recognition, driving traffic to their sites so that people will use them and maybe develop a habit, become a loyal user. When those went under, there weren't a lot of direct marketers in the business that really saw this as a scalable, viable solution. It just kind of happened. And it happened in the traditional direct marketing verticals, e-commerce, obviously. Mortgage, finance, and for-profit education was trending up at that time as well. Reactive innovation. Goal is to fill the market void. Solve a problem, capitalize on a new opportunity. Characteristics. For the startup, it's less risk, it's incremental opportunity. Cons, you guys got enough to worry about with your core offering to start branching off into new things. There's only 24 hours in the day, and those are probably already being occupied by something other than this new idea. And there's a challenge to scale. Sometimes you come up with a great idea you can't offer to everybody you want to try. It's a huge challenge. For the large company, pros, it's even less risk. Easier access to resources. Cons, again, challenge to scale, challenge to streamline. Again, back to that thing where when we come up with a cocktail napkin idea, how difficult is it to get it from that piece of paper to an actual productionalized, streamlined offering that any of your national sales team can take any client and offer. And service as much of demand as possible. Very difficult. So the example of this is one of our latest products called Outlet Open Platform. What it's called is it's a demand-side platform, or DSP. If those of you aren't familiar with the online advertising world, it's essentially an interface that you face towards a client, towards an advertiser or an agency. You say, run your campaigns, run them yourself. You have access to our system. You know the sites we have access to. Run your campaigns yourself. It's a huge thing. It's a big trend in our market, or in our industry now. There's marketing risk. If it failed, maybe PR concerns that, we took a swing at something we missed. Definitely not good. But our core business would still be intact. But there's some potential opportunity costs. We're pulling people off of other projects. Those other projects, who knows what they would have turned into. So there's a calculated risk there. It's mitigated, but risk nonetheless. Tech challenge, huge tech challenge. We client facing. It's not us pulling the levers anymore behind the scenes. It is facing the client. They're going to be using it every day. It's got to look good. It's got to be reliable. And it's got to scale. It's got to be able to take the demand on as fast as it becomes available. It's a hard reward. It's one of our fastest growing parts of the business. And also the scaling efforts, they fostered some new technology, some new use of big data architecture that we're not only using with this particular product, but we're using company-wide. And it's essentially what we're doing is we're leveraging those efforts and the new knowledge we gained from exploring new technology for this particular product to solve other company problems. And also, the reporting interfaces, we're using it internally too. We're using it for better analytics, better reporting, better insight to what we do every day. So, in conclusion, innovation, I still treat innovation as a characteristic of culture. There's a decent argument that it could be science. I'm not going to say it's not a valid argument. I still see innovation as an art form. While we help, a lot of us in larger companies, we have established R&D and engineering and marketing teams. They continually proactively move to do the next disruptive thing. It's essential to have new ideas though. It's essential that outside of the core development, that there is essentially startups within the company, new ways, increase the top line revenue, grow the business that way. For us, we can get stuck in the same rut, iterating the same product over and over again with little results. Got to be open to any member of the business. If some junior sales account manager has an idea, you got to listen. It doesn't matter where it comes from. Remember, great art can come from anyone. Must be able to test, analyze, and prototype rapid. That's kind of the theme of this meetup, it sounds like. is to test, analyze, prototype fast out the door, and must be taken seriously. That means is this is kind of a challenge to anyone on the executive level here, either be it a large company or a startup. New ideas have to be taken seriously. They can't be written off. Think of all the established, especially in the tech world. Think about how many meetings they were laughed at. They're now huge successes. And these groups can engage in both types of innovation, lead to faster company growth. Thank you.
So what percentage of the business, dollar-wise, is proactive reactive, and what percentage of number of products is proactive reactive?
Well, you know, it's interesting. It's tough to really put a percent distribution on that because, you know, while I'd say our core offering now is one of those proactive kind of gambles, so many offshoots and derivative offerings have been part of that reactive stuff. The reactive stuff is always one advertiser. It's always one advertiser comes to you and wants to do some fancy new thing. I want to start tracking this. I want to start seeing this report. Something outside of the current thing. We have to adapt to it. And then somewhere along the lines, just saying, hey, all we need to do is this. Minimal amount of development. We can release it. Set sales boost it. See how it takes. So, you know, they're constantly feeding.
So your big proactive was 12 years ago. Nothing new since?
Plenty of new since. I think disrupting $1 billion, multi-billion dollar industry is enough for 12 years. We'll come up with something sometime
It's hard,
in the next
yeah.
12. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Pardon me?
That one wasn't bad either.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, there's always new ad formats. Video, mobile, social. We're in on everything. It's a matter of we're always thinking about what we can do that no one else is doing.
And your blind spots?
Our blind spots, yeah. And there's always. Yes, sir.
You mentioned a couple of goals, one for proactive and one for reactive. Proactive being disruption,
Yeah.
and then for reactive.
That's really just a kind of a buzzword.
Yeah.
It's I figured I'd sound cool if I said disruption. It sounds like I'm in tech if I say disruption.
The other one was filling a void. There's another one that comes to mind, and that is preempting disruptive innovation. In other words, preempting a disruptive competitor. I'll give you a couple of quick examples.
Well, patent lawyer, that's what a lot of patent clients do for a living via
Yes,
patent
so
system.
if you think about Napster, right? When
Yeah.
Napster first came out, the solution for the record companies was to sue them into oblivion.
Yep.
And I tell you what, there were all kinds of people who were trying to convince the record labels, you need to change your business model now because it's all going to be over after a while. They would not believe it. For year after year, they would not believe that was happening. The same thing, I believe, is true in online education, where you now have these massively online
MOOCs.
They're MOOCs. I forget what the acronym stands for exactly. I'm actually taking a course right now. But if you talk to one of the incumbents who are for-profit education, I think you got some experience in that industry, that they're under some threat from these free courses online, they'll poo-poo you. They'll say,
MIT.
I'm sorry?
Any MIT grads?
MIT Open Courseware Project?
Open courseware project.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So
You can
that
get
was
a master's degree in pretty much any discipline.
So that was going on, 4 or 5 years ago is when that started. And I tried to convince people at an online university, the executives, we really need to start dipping our toes in the water here because this is going to ultimately be a threat. I was one of those people that got laughed out of the room. They don't have that kind of culture. Despite being kind of forward because they're online,
Yeah.
kind of consider that to be kind of progressive.
Yeah.
But I think any incumbent who is raking in money hand over fist, if you have a completely disruptive new business model, they will likely ignore it.
Yep.
Because it's totally different from what's making them all the money.
Yep.
So that's preemptive, innovation to preempt disruptive competition. And I've been able to convince them we should dip our toes in the water, we should spend a little bit of money doing some skunk work here to try and get involved in this so that we can understand how to deal with it if it becomes real. And I think it will become real. And it is now becoming real. How do you do that?
Perfect. Well, perfect example of that in our business is there's always new, we call pure play startup, where they offer literally one niche solution to one niche problem. Happens to be that the problem is pretty widespread, but that's what they do. And these guys are really tough to deal with because they're aggressive, and they shouldn't. They shouldn't. There's always a debate when we come up with something new about how tight we want to keep the intellectual property to the fence. So a good example of this is when we have a new technology, or we have a technology that's established, and we're trying to preempt that disruption. Making a decision, doing a cost-benefit analysis, saying with all these people popping up that want to compete with our solution, you know, with what it's going to cost in our churn rate, and our budgets being siphoned away from ours because there's all these new vendors that advertisers want to try. Advertisers and agencies always want to try something new, and so it's how do we prevent that? Well, why don't we just take our software and open source it? It's the best solution. Give it to everybody. Give them essentially no leg to stand on. Anyone who's in the business will see your solution sucks. Yeah, you put on a great marketing deck. Ours is the best. We're the best, and we're so much bigger than you. We'll give it away for free. And it's interesting because there's always that kind of cost benefit going on, and it's expensive to lose advertisers because it's expensive to get them back. We always do get them back, but it takes a long time. It takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of investment. So that's kind of an example where I think what we do, where we try to preempt is and that's in the software business. If you're in the tech, the tech business, and your technology is your core offering, similar to ours, then uttering the words open source is sacrilege. So it's a bold move, but sometimes it's the right thing, and sometimes it can really prevent you headaches down the road.
Any other questions?
Cheers, thank you.